for that segment. We appreciate the One Team. And, of course, the One Team consists of Inspiro Financial, All Valley Escrow. I like to include the TCs because they're part of our team too. So
and Seller's Choice NHD.
And Seller's Choice, yes. Don't forget all that. Yeah.
Thanks,
All
Armando.
right. So as we go into the main enchilada of today's event, we have Mr. John Syatt, who's going to be joining us shortly. He will be talking about the listing presentation. Now, I like to share something before we get into John with regards to the listing presentation. A couple weeks ago, Karen Betancourt introduced the the remixes, is what I like to call them, of our listing presentations, and they look awesome. But I want to emphasize, and it didn't really hit me until I came to Everest. And many of you have been with different branches or different brokerages, and they all have the tool. They all have, these things. But ultimately, I think we all know after being with Everest for this amount of time that the listing presentation is about you. It's not about what's printed on a piece of paper, because if you're just relying on this to show your value, then you're already shooting yourself in the foot. And on the other hand, the other brokerages that they might be interviewing are doing the same exact thing. So we have to elevate our game, and let's not be shy about who we are as realtors and express what we do for them, the customer service that we provide for them, the stuff that we do above and beyond, and just great communication and be able to articulate it is what we're trying to get at. And I know John's going to cover that, and I can't wait to see this because it's been a while, and I'd love to see this every 3 or 6 months, kind of refresh. So without further ado, Mr. John Syatt, take it away.
I feel like a caged lion just threw meat at the cage, but I can't get to it. Let me get to it.
Go for it, man.
What you said, Armando, is so important. And hello, everybody out there. It's good to see all the names and the faces as I scan through. I have two really conversations that I like to have consistently in real estate. Number one is mindset, and number two is listing presentation. And I really put them in that order because I think that mindset is the most important thing, but a very close second is the listing presentation. And what you said, Armando, is so important. If you take anything away from our conversation today, as you listen, it's what Armando said there. My conversation with you today is about helping you recognize that the listing presentation, and I'm going to get into that in just a second, even calling it that, is more about you and the value that you bring to the table and the way in which you distinguish yourself from the competition with things that you cannot buy. That brochure that he showed in front of his phone a couple of times, that's something you can buy. We can buy all sorts of collateral material. We can decide to affiliate with a particular company and the gizmos and the gadgets that they provide. But at the end of the day, the single most important factor by which your clients will choose to work with you above all else will be the way in which you communicate with them and the confidence or the lack thereof that they feel in working with you, period. No one will ever convince me that anything is going to be more important than that, including the commission that you charge and the price that you tell them. Because I can tell you over the course of a career of actively selling real estate, 16 years prior to starting the company, but 26 years in being involved in it and coaching and training agents, the single most important thing to a client is the ability of the agent to communicate effectively to help them feel confident in the decisions that they make. And that includes to decide to pay a 6 or 7% commission and to list at a price that makes sense to actually get the listing sold, not just what the seller wants to hear. So having said that, if you're taking notes, and hopefully you are, you've probably written at the top listing presentation because that's what this was built to be. And we're going to talk about that. But again, remember what I said, there are two important topics that I like to talk about. Number one, mindset, and number two, the listing presentation. I'm going to start first of all with the mindset. We have to change the mindset, Armando, that this whole conversation about the listing presentation is a presentation. It's not. If we treat it as a presentation, most people hate to give presentations. And what's true about the sales process is that people hate to be presented to. People don't like to be processed. It's like sausage. I don't know if you like sausage. I like sausage, but I don't enjoy watching sausage being made. It's an ugly process. People don't like to be processed. They don't. How many of us, think about it, you've gone to buy a car and the salesperson is horrible. They're on script and you can tell. They're doing exactly what they were trained to do, but you can tell you're being processed. And they get to that question, and I know you've all been asked this question, what do we have to do today to get you to drive away in this car? When they ask me that question, it turns me off, because what I know is that they're just processing me. It's those salespeople who just get out of that box and they start to have a conversation. So this is what I want you to do. If you're taking notes and you wrote the top listing presentation, I want you to cross out presentation, and over the top of that, I want you to write in conversation, because that's really what this is about. It's not about a presentation. It's about having a legitimate conversation with people who get an opportunity to share their story, who get an opportunity to share their wants, their needs, their wishes, their hopes, their desires, and their fears. And if we give people an opportunity to do that in the conversation, it is the two things that we absolutely have to do in this conversation to get them to decide to follow us. We have to build rapport, which is like, trust, and respect. And we have to build value. And if we can get them to like us, trust us, and respect us, in other words, to have confidence in us, then we start to provide them value. Because see, if they feel confident in us, it allows them to feel safe. That is the number one thing that sellers want to feel when they're sitting down with you, is they want to feel safe. They want to feel safe. And they can feel safe to a much higher degree if we'll give them an opportunity to share their story. So that it really, I get asked this question a lot. How do you overcome this objection or that objection? Or based upon what's going on now, how do you handle this statement? What do you do? Well, my first response to any of those questions, regardless of what the objection is this answer. And it's not a snide, it's not a cheeky answer, it's a legitimate answer. Don't get the objection in the first place. I watch over the years how agents will say, well, I get all of these objections. And I will say to them, it's interesting, because 9 times out of 10, when I give my presentation, I don't get those objections. And I certainly don't get all of those every presentation. And they'll look at me like, well, why? Well, the answer is because I give, quite frankly, a better presentation. In other words, I have a conversation with them. So one of the things that I want to encourage you to do is you're working to schedule these appointments with people to list their home. Stop calling it a presentation with them. Stop telling them that you want to come out and give a listing presentation. That's internal vernacular. Look, if we were cops and we wanted to use the internal language of cops, or if we were in the Army and we were going to use the internal language of the Army, we could do that and use all of our acronyms, RPs and TDAs and all these other things. Don't use that language with your people. Real estate is confusing enough. It's intimidating enough. Just simply speak plain language with them and give them an opportunity to share their story. So first of all, call it a conversation, because that's what it should be. And if you'll turn it into a conversation, it will allow them to be a lot more relaxed and a lot less defensive, which gives you the opportunity to lead them much further down the pathway of them saying yes to choosing you versus the competition. Fair enough? So, and Gabriella, you're very welcome on that point. So let's start with this. It is really simple, in my opinion. The listing conversation is very simple. Let's just simply acknowledge that it comes with 2 parts. The first part is the choose me phase. My goal when I sit down with sellers at their kitchen table or wherever it is and have this conversation is to recognize that my job in the first half of the conversation is to get them to choose me versus the competition. They have so many people that they can choose from, and yet they've chosen to sit down with me, and yet the battle's not over. They still have to choose me. There's so many things that they want to know. And what do typically sellers want to know? What are the 2 top things that they want to know that they consider part and parcel to the decision to choose me? The first is going to be what? The price. What price do I believe their home should be listed at? They're always looking for the highest bidder on that one. You know that. As listing agents, they're always asking us a price, not because they don't really know. In today's world, they know. At least they think they know, because they've consulted what site? Zillow, in most cases. And Zillow is usually wrong, but they put a lot of credit and they heed the information that Zillow provides. So they think that they know. So they want to see if we're going to give an answer that matches to the real estate god Zillow. And if we don't, then there's a problem. But then the second question that they normally have is, and what is your commission? How much are you going to charge me? unfortunately, most sellers are put in a position to choose to work with an agent based upon those two factors, because the agent who presents to them doesn't know how to present in a way that allows them to really focus on the things that ultimately matter. Because you as an agent do not get to decide what the ultimate value of a home will be. You get to determine the price with the seller, but you don't get to determine the value. And oftentimes when a home is listed, it's not listed at the value. It's overpriced. So we need to recognize that it is typical for sellers to want to choose based upon price and commission, but it is not productive for them to do that. And they don't want to do that if a different conversation were had. In other words, if we didn't give a presentation, but rather had a conversation that allowed them to trust us, to like us, and respect us, and give us an opportunity to offer value to them by the way in which we communicate. So I want you to write this down. I want you to write down this question. What is the primary building block of a great conversation? Think about that. What is the primary building block of a great conversation? I'm going to wait for some answers to show up on the chat. I don't want to open it up with the voice because of all the background noise, but anybody? Okay, Misty, spot on. Misty says asking the right questions. It is not only asking questions, but it's asking well-designed questions. And Eve Rose says, what are their goals? Yes, we ask questions about what they want, what they need, what they desire, what they hope for, and also what they fear. The number one building block of great conversations, guys and gals, is asking questions. We've all been there in situations just in our personal lives where we meet a stranger at a cocktail party, at one of our kids' parties that, you know, the parents are over and watching the kids do their things, and the parents are out on the patio or in the living room kind of talking to one another as the kids are being entertained by the hired entertainment. To watch how awkward people are and how difficult it is to have conversations with what seem to be normally functioning adults is so interesting. It's because people fail to understand that the best way to build rapport with people and to get to know people is to simply ask questions. Asking a question shifts the burden from ourselves to the other person to talk. Remember that. So when we talk about the listing conversation, most of the talking should not be done by you as the agent. It should be done by the sellers, by Mr. and Mrs., by the people who have a home they want to sell. So then the question is, well, what do we talk about? What questions do we ask? So I'm going to give you an outline. This outline that I'm going to give you is the very outline that I used as an agent. It's the outline that George used in his presentations, in his conversations. And what I will tell you is that we had over 85 to 90% signature rates on our contracts when we went out to present. So if you're looking to get 85 to 90% or more of your contract signed when you go out on a listing conversation, then I would strongly encourage you to follow this outline. Now, look, some of you have already great presentations. I scanned the list of names and those who are participating. Some of you have got some great presentations and outlines that you're already using. So what I would say to you is, this is probably going to be a repeat of what you're already doing, or it may be a confirmation of what you're doing, or it may be a reminder of what you used to do, which you need to get back to doing, or it may be a reminder of some things that you need to incorporate into your presentation. Whatever the case may be, I know that this is going to be a helpful conversation. So in the choose me phase, that part one phase, the first thing that we need to do is we need to, and just write this down, number one, we need to thank them, we need to acknowledge them, and we need to promise something to them. It's called the thank you, the acknowledgement, and the promise. Now, for me to remember it, and this is the way I remembered it years ago, just so as I was sitting there in front of people, I made some mental notes so that I didn't go off course. I didn't stand there or sit there like a deer caught in headlights. I could just simply go to my acronym. The acronym was TAP. Thank you, acknowledgement, promise. Thank you, T, acknowledge, A, P, promise. Thank you, acknowledge, and promise. It's called the TAP. So the first thing that I do in the choose me phase is I tap. I thank them, I acknowledge them, and I promise them. This is what's going to be important. See, most of you probably do this to some degree when you go out and you will say to them, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Amesqua, I just want to thank you. And I really want to acknowledge that this is a big decision. And I promise I'm not going to waste your time. So thank you for your time. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody wants to be acknowledged and thanked for their time. But there's so much more that could be done in that moment to build rapport, to reduce the sense of risk, to allow them to put down that defensive wall, to begin to actually listen to what you have to say. Because see, for most people, that statement of, look, I want to thank you for your time. I know this is a big decision, and I promise you that I won't waste your time. Most people don't even hear you say that because they're so nervous about having a stranger in their home who's worse, a salesperson, and they've interviewed probably 2 or 3 before. They just start to glaze over, and they don't hear what you're saying until you truly start to speak their language. Let me repeat what I just said. Until you truly start to speak their language. So what I do, instead of use those throwaway statements about thanking them about something general and acknowledging something general and promising them something general, I'm always going to go back to my previous conversations with them. Because I know that we talked over the phone, and if we didn't, we should have. Because I believe that the listing conversation starts on the phone at pre-qualification. So one of the things that I'm going to do, guys and gals, is I'm going to make certain that I have a conversation with Mr. and Mrs. Amezcua, and I find out some very important things about their decision to put their home on the market. One of the things that I'm going to ask is, what caused them to decide to sell their home? What's happening next? And it gives them an opportunity to tell their story. So that when I come out the next day or a couple of days later to have the conversation, one of the things that I'm going to do is repeat back to them some of the things that they said. It's really important because remember this. We all know this, but we seem to forget it when it comes to business and sitting down with people and we get into business mode, into quote unquote presenting mode. The number one human need is acceptance. It's validation. It's acknowledgement. If we want to accept people, if we want to validate people, if we want to acknowledge people, one of the best things that we can do is to let them know that we listened to what they said by repeating back some of the things that they told us. So when I asked Armani and his wife about what's caused them to decide to sell their home over the phone, I'm writing some of the things down. And then I like to throw in the question, share with me some of your frustrations. Have you sold a home before or bought a home before? And they're going to give me the answers to those questions. In most cases, people, 9 times out of 10, they've dealt with a real estate agent. And we know this. In most cases, they've got some negative story to share. So I want to hear from him what some of his concerns are, some of the challenges that he's had before in his relationships with agents. So let me show you what that conversation, once we're sitting down at the kitchen table, looks like, so you see what my tap looks like versus what I showed you before. And just assume that what I'm saying here is exactly what Armani and his wife shared with me in the conversation the night before. These are simply some of their words that I wrote down that I'm now repeating back to them to let them know that I heard exactly what they said, so that they feel validated, they feel heard. So what I'm going to say is this. So, Armani, first of all, I want to thank you, because in your conversation last night with me, you and your wife both mentioned that you had your home on the market last year and it did not sell. And you mentioned some challenges with your previous agent. You said that the agent was not communicating effectively with you, not consistently at all, that usually when you guys had a conversation, it was because you initiated the conversation. And then you also said that you weren't certain that they were doing anything to market the home. I just want you to know that I heard what you said there. And I acknowledge that you've had those challenges. And I promise you this, by the time that we're done with our conversation this afternoon, you're going to know exactly what I do to communicate. We're going to be on the same page. Not only will you know exactly what I will do, but you're going to approve of that approach, that plan. And better yet, you're going to know exactly what it's going to take to get your home sold. And you're going to have 100% confidence that I can get your home sold this time. So are you ready to get started? And then they're going to smile and they're going to say yes. That is usually what happens. Now, if that's not what's happening in your conversation, I strongly encourage you to do that. I think it was Paul Harvey, and it may have been George Burns. I think it was actually George Burns who said, the key to a great presentation is to have a strong opening and a strong closing and keep them as close together as possible. I don't know how you could start a listing conversation any stronger than acknowledging some of the things that they want to accomplish and some of the challenges that they have mentioned. So I strongly encourage you to, number one, make certain that you're starting your listing conversations by pre-qualifying them, and then taking notes and making certain you mention back some of those primary concerns or those wants or needs, wishes or desires that they have in that opening statement, which I call the tap or the thank you, the acknowledgement and promise. Fair enough? Okay, so once we transition from the tap, then the second thing in the choose me phase is what I call the map or the game plan. Now, map does not stand for anything. It's not an acronym. It is truly a map. I want to give them kind of an idea as to what we're going to accomplish as we sit down this afternoon or this evening in their home. Because everybody wants to know where they're going. If I said to all of you, hey, let's go, and I started to walk away, the question that you would either ask internally or externally would be what? Where? Where are we going? Everybody wants to know where they're going. So as you sit down with people, let them know. So one of the things that I always do is this. Once I thank them, acknowledge them, and promise them, then I'll just simply say this. Look, Armani, what I'd like to do is just briefly share with you what we're going to accomplish this afternoon. Really just kind of give you a game plan or a roadmap. Would that be okay if I just give you a quick outline? Okay. So number one, I want to make certain that I find out from you again. We've talked a little bit about this, but I think it was really kind of just scratching the surface. We didn't get into the detail of it. And I don't think we allowed you to really express everything that you needed to. And even if we did, I just want to make certain we cover it again. So we're going to talk specifically about what's causing you to decide to sell your home and what's happening next. I know you mentioned that you're going to San Diego and you want to be closer to your kids and your grandkids there. I can see, is that some gray hair I see on your sideburns there, Mr. Amiskwa? Oh no. But yeah, see, I got some people to laugh. Look at that, Armani. I have to do that because he's not much younger than me. But I want to let him know that, look, the first thing we're going to talk about is what's causing them to decide to sell their home. In other words, I want to know his and his wife's what? What's the word that we use? Yes, motivation, but we never want to utter that word. I never want to use the word motivation with my clients because motivation is a sales word and it's a process word. It's a presentation word. I don't give a whit about their motivation. What I want to understand is what is their story? What are they trying to accomplish? What is happening next in their life that's causing them to decide to, in most cases, to transact the largest transaction that they will ever experience in their life? I want to know what that's all about. And they're nervous about this whole thing. So if I give them an opportunity to explain that and express themselves, it's more likely that they're going to calm down. They're going to feel much safer because somebody is listening to them. And if they feel safer because somebody's listening to them, then when it's my time to lead them through the process, they're more likely to what? Follow me. They're more likely to listen to me. And remember that. I want you to write off into the margins of your notes is that I am a leader. See, they're looking for a leader. They want to follow you. They're in the process of eliminating people that they can't follow because they can't trust them. They don't like them. They don't respect them. They don't feel safe with them. It is your job as a listing agent to help them feel that way, to help them have a connection, to see the value, to separate yourself from the competition by reducing the risk, showing them that you're capable of leading them through this process that is scary to them. Because as scary as it can be for us as real estate agents sitting down with sellers who are going to pay 5, 6, 7% for this transaction, think about how scary it is for them, where they might do this 3, 4, 5 times at best, at most, in their entire lifetime. And we do it many, many times during the course of the year. They're afraid. So that second step, I want to find out what's causing them to decide to sell their home. What's happening next? I'm going to repeat this question a couple of times here so you can write it down, but this is being recorded to go back and look at it. I would strongly encourage you, do not change this. One of the words that you will not find in the question is why. I'm not asking Armani and his wife, why are you deciding to sell your home? What's happening next? Because I believe that asking the question with the word why is me asking them to justify their decision. See, if you bought a car and it's red, and I asked you, the first question I asked you is, why did you buy a red car? As opposed to, that's a great color. I love your red car. See, if I ask you why did you buy a Chevy? Why did you buy a red one? Why did you buy it at that dealership? I'm asking you to justify your decision. Your seller doesn't want to be put in a position where they have to justify their decision. You're just curious. What's caused you to decide to sell your home? What's happening next? In other words, share your story with me. I'd love to hear what you have to say. It's very critical. And I know it seems like it's a nuance. It is. It's that subtle. I'm just telling you, it will have a very significant impact on the mentality, on the reaction that you're going to get from the person that you are actually conversing with. Let me share with you why I know that. Multiple times I have been stopped in the conversation. Once we had that conversation, when I asked this question, share with me, Mr. and Mrs. Amezcua, what's causing you to decide to sell your home? What's happening next? When I ask that question and listen to what they have to say, writing down the notes and repeating back some of those important things, he sees that I actually care. And I have gotten in my conversations where people have literally stopped me. I remember one time, this gal was a soon-to-be retired major in the United States Army. She was very much a driver. She was very direct. She didn't use a lot of words and she didn't mince her words. And I felt it from the very beginning when she invited me into her house over the phone, and we set the appointment. And she didn't disappoint me when we got to the front door. She was very direct, very clear, and almost demanding. Well, I'm sitting there with her and taking her through this process where I thanked her, I acknowledged her, and I promised. And then I asked that question. Dominique, share with me, what's caused you to decide to sell your home? What's happening next? Well, she shared with me the story that she wanted to start this pottery making shop. She wanted to teach other people how to make pottery. It's been something that she's wanted to do since she was a kid. She makes pottery at home down in her basement. She has a couple of pottery wheels. Well, she wants to move to Arizona, and she wants to build a house that has attached to it a shop where she can bring students in to show them how to build pottery. And when she shared that with me and I asked more questions about that, so I could share with you what I just shared with you, the only reason I know any of that is not because she volunteered it, because I kept pressing. Tell me more about that. That's interesting. How long have you wanted to do that? When did you start making pottery? All of those things I discovered because I asked a simple question. What's caused you to decide to sell your home? Once we had that conversation, I wanted to go on to the second question that you should be asking in the choose me phase. I'm going to give you the question, but I'm going to tell you what she said to me once I asked this question. I said to her, I said, what do you believe a top agent like me should be doing in today's market to actually get a home sold? See, I wanted to know from her perspective what she believed I should do to sell the home. Notice what I didn't ask her. I didn't ask her, what price do you feel we should use, or how much commission do you think I should charge? I asked her, what do you believe I should do as a top agent in order to get your home sold? In other words, what are the specific activities do you think I should engage in? See, that question shifts the conversation from the things that most sellers want to talk about, because we have, as agents or as a profession, have trained them, let's focus on price and commission, because that's all they usually have to choose upon. Because we don't give them enough value in the other arenas, because we all tend to offer the same thing as the next person: a business card, a sign, the MLS, and a brochure. But what we can offer them in this conversation is something that the other agents can't buy. It is a great conversation that's offered with authenticity, questions that are designed to accomplish an intended outcome, to get them to feel safe, to see value in our leadership, to get them to follow our pace and basically our plan to get their home sold. So I asked her that question. I said, what do you believe a top agent like myself should do in today's market to get a home sold? What are the things that you believe I should do to get your home sold? And she said, time out. And she said it with such authority, I kind of sat back for a second. I thought, okay, what did I do wrong? She's not happy. And I said, okay, share with me what's your thought? And she said, this is so interesting. And I said, what's interesting? And she said, I've interviewed 2 other agents. You're the 3rd agent. She said, no other agent has asked me that question to the point that I shared everything that I just shared with you about what I'm trying to accomplish, to the point that I told you that I've been making pottery since I was 13 years old, and I want to start a pottery school in my home in Arizona. She said, nobody else discovered that. They didn't know that. She said, I know you just asked me a question, but I have a question for you. And I said, what's that? And I swear to you, this is what she asked me. She said, would you do me a favor? And I said, sure, what's that? She said, would you be willing to list my home? And I swear to you, that is what she asked me. Would you be willing to list my home? Now, I know for a fact that that conversation that I had with her was no different than the conversation that I had had with several people before her and a career of people after her. And I know that it works. She was not a unique exception to the conversation, to the results of that sort of conversation. Because what I recognized is that the number one human need is acknowledgement, it's acceptance, it's validation. And me simply asking that question about what was causing her to decide to sell her home, and then me drilling down deeper into that, allowed us to connect. She saw that I took interest in what she had to say. And I don't care if it's a divorce, if there was a death in the family, if there's a health issue, if there are financial issues, or if it's something exciting like I'm selling because I want to go down to Arizona to start a pottery school for other people and teach them. That if people sense that you're authentic and you really want to know because you want to help them and lead them through this very difficult and scary process, people will open up. And that's the key. We've got to get people to open up. These well-designed questions to accomplish an intended outcome. So the choose me phase consists of those two things. Number one, the thank you, the acknowledgement, and the promise. And asking that first question. Share with me, what caused you to decide to sell your home? What's happening next? When they give you the answer, whatever it is, I'm moving to San Diego. Great, what's taking you to San Diego? Well, we have a daughter there, and she's married, she just had a baby. Good for you, boy or girl? Oh, it's a little boy. What's his name? Well, his name's Armani. So that sounds like they named him after you. That is fantastic. Good for you. So have you ever lived in San Diego before? No, we never have. Are you a little bit nervous about it? Yeah, we're a little bit nervous about it, but we're excited to be there with the kids and, baby Armani. Good for you. How soon would you like to be there? Well, I don't know. That's why we wanted to talk to you to find out how long you think that will take. Well, ideally, if you could just wave a wand, how soon would you like to be there? Well, if we could be there in the next 30 to 60 days, that would be great. In other words, don't just simply ask, why do you want to go to San Diego? We want to get there because we want to be there closer to family. Good. Well, let me share with you what I do to get home sold. That you're missing such a great opportunity to connect with the person and allow them to feel relaxed and comfortable to follow your lead through what are going to be some very difficult decisions. What the price of the home will be, and also choosing you versus the competition when it comes to the fact that some agents are charging 4%, 3.5%, or 3%, and you're going to charge 5%, 6%, or 7%. So it is critical that you're having that conversation. The second question again is, what do you believe a top agent like me should be doing in today's market to get your home sold? And then I've always clarified by saying, what are the specific things you think that I should do? And then they're going to give answers. Now, if in that question, they say, well, I don't know, you're the expert, because they could say that. I had people several times say that. I don't know, you're the expert. You tell me what you do. I'm always going to press back and say, you know what, I am the expert. And I have a very specific plan that works every time if you follow it. But here's what I know, Armani. I know this, that you have some expectations, especially given the fact that you've dealt with agents in the past. You mentioned you had some concerns about the way in which your agent communicated. You also were concerned about the lack of marketing or wondering if there was even a marketing plan. So my question for you is, based upon your previous experiences, what do you believe that I should be doing? Or better stated, based upon your circumstance and your experience, what are some of the things that we can talk about in depth today that would make you feel more comfortable in choosing to work with me than the last agent you worked with where your home didn't get sold? What are some of those things? And what is he going to do? He's going to go back, tell, well, I mentioned over the phone that there was horrible communication, that he never reached out to me consistently. So I'm going to acknowledge that. I'm going to say, yes, you did say that, and I wrote that down. So we can talk about that. But before we do that, is there anything else that caused you concern or you believe that an agent should be doing proactively? Well, he never really presented a marketing plan. He was a referral. I was told he was a great agent, so I assumed that was the case. He came over, we signed some documents, and we really never saw him again. So I'd really like to know, your marketing plan. Okay, great. So what I hear you saying is that communication and marketing are the two most important things. Is there anything else that's important to you? Well, I can't think of anything else, but if there's anything else, John, that you think we should know, I would appreciate if you share that with us. Great. So now he's given me two things that I know that I need to talk about, and likely that if we talk about those two things and address all of his concerns, he's going to do what? He's going to choose me. I'm going to make certain that he chooses me. And here's why. Because he's told me, if you remember when we were kids in high school or college, when our teacher or professor gave us an opportunity to take a test, sometimes they would give us a choice. You can take an open book test or a closed book test. Now, I think I know the answer, but I want to ask you, which test would you prefer to take, the open book or the closed book test? I'm looking for some answers on the chat. Armani says open. Anybody crazy enough to agree with Armani? Okay, Misty says open. Okay, Gabby says open. Annie says open. Yes. Okay, so we agree. If you were like me, BJ says open. Yes, if you were like me, I was a crammer. I would cram the night before to take the test. But if the teacher said to me that it was going to be an open book, I wouldn't even prepare the night before. All I would do is make certain that I did what? In the morning, I put the book to that topic in my backpack, and I brought that to class. So when 8 o'clock bell went on, I had that book in front of me, and I opened it up to the pages, the chapters we were being tested on, and I would just scan the chapters, each sentence, one by one, looking for the words that I found in the questions. So if the question was about the topography of the Utah geography in southern Utah, I would just look for those words, topography, southern Utah. I would just scan those words until I found it in the chapter, and then I would read on that, and I would find the answer to the question on the test. See, your sellers are testing you, basically. They want to see if you know the answers to the questions. But here's the thing. They themselves often don't realize what the questions or the answers are until you ask them. The questions are the two that I've given you. The first question that discovers their motivation without ever asking that question, using the word motivation. Share with me what's caused you to decide to sell your home, what's happening next. And then that second question of, what do you believe a top agent like myself should be doing in today's market to get your home sold? See, those two questions will bring out the answers to the test. If you can have great conversations about those two topics, number one, validating them by listening to their story about their motivation, this exciting or sad, concerning, strenuous thing that's happening that's causing them to sell their home. And number two, finding out from them what their expectations are. Now, let me talk about that for a second. Expectations. What I have discovered over and over again in my personal life, as well as coaching thousands of agents, the number one thing that will cause a relationship to break down or to never successfully be formed is going to be a lack of expectations being discovered and therefore never met. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about any relationship that you've been in the past. That relationship broke down because your expectations were not met entirely. They were either completely missed or partially missed and not met, and therefore the relationship was ended. I want you to think about that. So see, your sellers are no different. They have a set of expectations. So one of the things that I love to say to my sellers is this, is it relates to that question. If I ask them, Armani, what do you expect a top agent like myself to do to get your home sold in today's market? And he says, well, I don't know. I mean, you're the professional. You tell me. I'm going to say, you know what, Armani, you're right. I am the professional, and my company and I sell thousands of homes every year. And yet what I know is this. You have some expectations. And what I've discovered over the years is this, that relationships that have expectations that are not met break down. And there are people who are upset in those relationships. What I know is that you have a set of expectations. I want to discover what your expectations are specifically in terms of the activities that you think an agent should engage in so that I can specifically address those expectations. Let me ask you a question. Do you have some expectations? And what do you think his answer is going to be? Yes. I'm going to say, would you like those expectations met? And what is he going to say? Of course. Then great, let's have a conversation about those expectations. And that's what we're going to do. Now, let's get in. We're not going to do this on every single one, but we could do this on every single one. Armani, if you would, let's take you off of mute because I want to just do a quick role play on this particular question. Because this one is one, there should be a lot of interaction, and there may be several different points that we have to do this on. So we narrowed yours down to two things. One, communication, and then the other was marketing, right? So we're only going to address communication specifically, but this is the way that I would do it. So Armani, let's just then get back to the two things that you said were most important to you. Number one, communication. You had mentioned that when you listed your home last year, you said over the phone that the agent was not very proactive. In fact, most of the conversations that you had with him that you initiated, that he rarely, if ever, called you to give you an update and let you know what was going on. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so if you could just tell me more about that. Tell me kind of what was happening there and how that made you feel. And I think more importantly, what did you actually expect? What were you hoping he would have done?
Probably the initial meeting was pretty proactive on his behalf. And then once we agreed to the terms and I was content with what was being offered, from that point on, it pretty much felt like I was chasing him. I was constantly trying to call him to find out what was going on rather than him call me. And every time I did connect with him, it felt like he was going to call me. And by chance, I just called him first. Okay.
So he left you with the impression that you had actually just gotten to him just before he was going to call you.
Right.
And he didn't, obviously that didn't build any confidence in you, in him.
No.
You know, it's interesting. You used the phrase that you felt like you were constantly chasing him. So what would the conversation need to look like consistently so you don't feel that way? What would you like to see? How would you like the communication to look when we list your home and we actually get your home sold?
Well, you know, I don't expect the daily, everyday type of call, but I would like to know the progress on maybe on a weekly scale. And in between that week, if there are any special engagements that were done, any news, maybe a listing that comes up that I'm competing with in the neighborhood, all those things, rather than me kind of finding it out on my own. I just figure that's what their job is to inform me and that I should be informed.
Okay. So as we're talking here, obviously you saw me take some notes. I just wrote down that if I could just summarize what you said, Armani, you really want to know what the activities were for the week up to the point that we last talked. And so if we talked about the showings, the people who looked at your home, what they said and what the agent's feedback was, but then also if we included in that what I'm doing to market and expose your home and what specific activities I'm engaging in that area, that if we're doing that consistently, let's say once a week, would that be what you're looking for? Would that meet your expectations?
I think it would. It would at least share. It would. I would feel that we're going in the right direction.
Okay. How do you prefer to communicate? Do you like email, text? Would you like a phone call, or what's best for you?
I actually like maybe a text when it's urgent matters.
Okay.
Phone call usually is the best. Emails, I never check my email.
Okay, so when I get an offer, you definitely want me to text you and say, hey, Armani, I've got an offer. We need to talk ASAP.
Yes.
Okay, because we're going to have that conversation. So as it relates, though, to the showing activities and also what I've been doing, what if I put together a report? I've got a report. It's called Golden Ruler, and it will show you basically what's happening online, the number of hits we've had, what they're looking at. And then also, I'm going to give you a report of the number of calls I've made daily because I actively prospect to try to go out and find buyers for your home to match them to your home. So if I'm sending you a weekly report via email for you to digest, but then if I actually picked up the phone and we had a 10 to 15 minute call at most just to review that, Would that meet your expectations? Is that something you're looking for, or is that overboard?
No, that would be exactly what I would like to see happen.
Okay, so then let's agree that that's what we'll do. Fair enough?
Yes, that's great.
That's great. So as it relates to communication, if your decision just hinged solely on communication, are you ready to list your home with me now? If it were just contingent upon communication. I know we haven't talked about other things, but if it were just communication, how do you feel? Would you want me to list your home for you?
Yes, if it was anything other than the previous experience, and it sounds like you're pretty on board, and based on the tools that you presented to me that come with listing with you, I do understand that some email communication will happen, but I do love that you will be re-emphasizing those tools as we go through the listing period.
Thank you. And let's get out of the role play for just a second here. So look.
No, I like it. I want to continue.
But here's the thing. See, this is just one aspect of what can be a very detailed conversation of other things. So we could do the same thing with the marketing, right? I would just simply ask you, so you had some concerns about marketing. We're not going to go through the role play, but I'm just going to kind of outline for everybody who's watching and listening that you would do the same thing. You had mentioned some concerns about a lack of marketing plan from the last agent. So if you could maybe just share with me some of the things that you would hope that they had done or what you were expecting. And then what you would do is say some of those things. Or you might say, I don't know, that's the point. And then I would simply say to you, that's great, I understand that. I might press him a little more, given the personality style, and say, well, what would be your best guess, Armani? And then he might give me a guess. But if I feel like he's a driver and I can't push him that direction, then I'm simply going to say, well, is online marketing important to you? Well, of course it's important to me. Great. Well, what about a yard sign? Is that important to you? Well, yes, it is. Well, the MLS, is that important to you? Well, yes, it is. You can come up with any suggestion to lead them to a topic that may or may not be important. See, if I said to a driver, for example, was the MLS important? Well, of course it is, but everybody does that. I want to know what you're doing relative to electronic marketing. What are you doing online? What does your online presence look like? See, at that point, he's giving me answers to the what? To the test. Yeah, he's giving me answers to the test. Then what I'm going to do, once he tells me that the test question is, well, what do you do with your online marketing? You would think that, well, at that point, I'll just start to tell him, Armani, these are all the things that I do for online marketing. No, I'm going to say, okay, great. Share with me, what sorts of online marketing are you looking for? What do you think is important? What websites have you noticed that you think would be important for us to have your home on? I want to hear what he has to say. And some of you might say, well, wait a minute. What if he gives you a website that I don't put their home on? Well, wouldn't it be important to know that at this point? As opposed to you walking away and him saying, well, it's so interesting. I wanted John to put the home on ABC real estate website, and that never came up. But the other agent I interviewed said that, my home's going to be on ABC website. So I'm going to choose that other agent. See, it's better to know what they want, even if it's something that you don't do. I mean, some agents will say, well, I don't do open houses, so I don't want to talk about that. No, you want to know. You do want to know. Because if an open house is absolutely important to them, and they're going to choose an agent based upon open houses, don't you at least want to have that conversation with them as opposed to avoid it and them choose the other agent and then not knowing why they chose the other agent? See, I'd prefer to have an opportunity to overcome that particular objection face-to-face than after the fact, if that makes sense. So see, both of those questions start out with share with me. When it comes to expectations, share with me, what do you believe a top agent like myself should do to get a home sold? And then he talked about communication. Share with me, what does that communication look like? He shares that with me. Tell me more about that. That's a very important statement. Tell me more about that. See, if he doesn't give you enough information about when he says communication, so Armani, when you say communication, tell me more about that. And then he shares more about that. Then I finished it up with, is there anything else about communication that you want to share with me? And then if there is something else, he'll tell me. That way I can add that on to whatever approach we're going to take to meet his expectations. And I'll do the same with online electronic marketing. When you say online electronic marketing, tell me what you mean. Well, I mean websites like Zillow or whatever. Great. Tell me more about that. What are you hoping for there? Well, I'm looking for this, or what is your plan? And then at that point I can share. I can say, well, I do this, I do that. Does that meet your expectation? Yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Great. So if I do these things in terms of electronic marketing, your home appearing on over 300 websites, right? Using a professional photographer and videography, does that meet your expectations? Yes, it does. So then let's plan on me doing that. Fair enough? Yeah, that would be great. Cool. Now we're going to finish with this because I know we're out of time. Once I've had those conversations about whatever it is, because it could be other things, guys and gals, it doesn't have to be just those two things. It could be anything else. It could be just simply negotiating, trust, respect, whatever. Doesn't matter. Once we've had those conversations, then I'm going to ask Armani and his wife this question. On a scale from 1 to 10, based upon what we've talked about, setting aside price and setting aside the paperwork, completing the paperwork. On a scale from 1 to 10, how do you guys feel about getting your home on the market and getting it sold with me? How do you feel? My expectation is they're going to stay at 10. If they say anything less than that, let me just show you quickly and we'll finish on this, Armani. So take off the mute for you. So Armani, on a scale from 1 to 10, based upon what we've talked about, how do you feel about us working together? Setting aside commission and setting aside the price of your home. I know we haven't had that conversation yet, but setting aside those two things, how do you feel about us working together to get your home sold?
I feel pretty confident. I would say probably 8 or 9.
Okay. So Armani, it's not your fault, but you're killing me because I believe that you deserve to have a better than 80 to 85% chance of selling your home, because that's what an 8.5 is. That's an 80, 85%. Are you looking for an 80% chance of getting your home sold or a 100% chance?
A 100% chance.
In other words, you want certainty.
Yes.
Okay. So what is it that we didn't talk about, setting aside commission and the price of your home, that we need to get you from that 8 to a 10? What have we missed? Now, you don't need to say anything at this point because we don't have time, but my point is this: it gets them to focus back on the things that truly matter when it comes to choosing an agent. I'm asking them to give me an answer relative to whether they trust me to get their home sold, not asking, do you believe in the price that I'm telling you? I want to separate those two. We can have that conversation, but I want them to acknowledge, yes, I believe that if I list with you, my home's going to get sold. But now I want to know, are you going to choose me based upon your confidence in me getting your home sold, or are you just looking for the highest bidder on your home for the least commission to be charged and hope that you're going to get it sold? See, I've got to help them transition their whole focus from what really matters, right, from the things that don't really matter. See, we'll come to a price that's going to work in most cases, don't we? We usually do. Sometimes we can do it immediately. Other times it takes a month or so because we've got to let them experience what the market's going to tell them. But first of all, I want them to acknowledge that given all the other choices, that I'm the best choice for the job of actually getting their home sold, if that makes sense. So now, if you want to have me back next week or some other time where we can get the second part done, we can do that. But that's typically about a 20, 25-minute conversation. Okay?
Well, John, I think it is due to probably have you back. Maybe have a part 2.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm happy to do it. It'd be great.
Yeah, because I think some of the questions that I'm looking in the chat room right now, one of the last ones was, as you closed out, before you get to talking about price and the commission, one of the questions from Gabriella was, how do you deal with the commission question?
Yeah.
So
well, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So either we could use that as a teaser for next week.
We're going to use it as a teaser because we're over time, and that'll be a great one to get people to come back. So yeah, sorry, but I'm not going to answer that.
Yeah.
My lips are sealed.
So I think this is great, man. I took all my notes, and I hope everyone did too. And we did record this segment, so we'll be posted up later on today on our Facebook private page, and will be emailed as well. So, John, thank you so much, man. Thank you very much.
I love doing this. It's fun to see everybody together and participating, and I love sharing the message. So it's cool.
Yes. No, thank you. And the only beef I have with you is I do not have gray. It's just a fade. I have a nice
it's the
fade.
lighting.
It's a fade from my beard to my hair, so don't go there.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you,
I
John,
got money
again.
for both of us. You
Yeah.
bet.
Thank you, John Site, our owner and president for California Everest here at Century 21. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You bet.
All right, guys. So that is it. If there's anything else, Charlene, I don't know if you want to add anything, or Karen, before we sign off.
Just we will bring John back, but next week is Leslie Appleton Young, CAR's chief economist. So we're really excited to have Leslie on next week, and then we can schedule John for the week after that. Gives everybody a chance to get their questions together.
Let's do that.
So
Awesome.
yeah, please
Thank
don't
you.
miss Leslie. That'll be a good meeting.
Yeah, next week's meeting is going to be awesome because we're going to get some really hard data on what's going on with California. So
Yeah, thank you, John. That was a great presentation.
You're welcome.
it was a great conversation.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it, guys. You guys have an awesome rest of your week. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you got some value out. And just go out and serve, guys. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you all when we see you. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.